As this is part 2 in the series, it's highly recommended that you start with part 1. You can find the link in the description. Pacing in neuro-linguistic programming means calling your attention to something that's true. And leading is then saying something that's not true, but in a structure that makes it appear to be true. A common example of this is news presenters and their hypnotic ability. They'll start the news by saying it was 10 degrees today. Your brain says, yes, that was true. And there was some light rain. Again, your brain says true. And then there was a storm in Thailand. Your brain, again, will say true. And then, after all these true pacing, they'll add some lead at the end, like, and this is proof that man-made global warming is going to destroy us if we don't raise our carbon tax in the next budget. The standard human brain can only take between 5 to 9 bits of true pacing information before it gets too overwhelmed and tired of analysing what it's hearing, and it just starts to accept what follows as true. This can then get written to our brain as a belief or an identity, and it can influence us for the rest of our life, until we learn how to question our own belief structure. Now here is where it gets interesting and also scary. The whole 5 to 9 bits of information that we can process before our critical factor becomes bypassed can be reduced, depending on the other language patterns and behavior manipulation that can be stacked on top. So now we need to move on to rapport. When you're in rapport with someone, your ability to critically evaluate what they say decreases. This is where we can get back to the 4 A's as I mentioned earlier: attraction, acquiescence, authority, and affinity. If someone sees you as being attractive, they'll be less critical of you because they will unconsciously want to impress you. If they see you as an authority figure, like a doctor or a police officer, they will not question you. If you have affinity, which is they see you as being part of their group, just like them, they'll go along with what you say. And finally, acquiescence. There's a certain amount of people who will just believe you because they don't want to think for themselves. This is where the grifter can manage and alter their image to appear as a member of your group, an authority figure or a charismatic leader in a position of power to exploit this flaw in your psychology. People are incredibly selfish and self-obsessed. What we project into the world is what we want back. Therefore, as a pacing technique, the echo technique is used with powerful effect. Not just as a pace, but also as a way to elicit and match someone's desired criteria and value structure, and also to detect the words they emotionally lean on. If they make a statement, you can simply repeat the statement back to them in the form of a question or a statement, and you'll see their eyes light up with interest as they finally feel someone is listening to them and understanding them. This is explained, for example, in neuro-linguistic programming, because the words we use and the patterns we use them in have a structure, and this has a unique significance to each individual. For example, if someone was to say, I want a piece of fruit, and you give them an apple, they might then say, why the hell did you give me an apple? I wanted an orange. This is because we all have our own unique description for things. An important side note is always to ask people what they mean if you ever feel a disconnect in a conversation, because it's usually as a result of you having a different definition of the same word or principle. Another way neuro-linguistic programming would break down the echo technique is what they would call the modalities and the submodalities. This is VAKOG, or visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatorial, or in other words, sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. Just like in a computer program, there's a procedure, a sequence of events that must occur to get a result. NLP states our mind has an identical process, where it encodes all memories, beliefs, values, criteria, and experiences through the unique sequence of the VAKOG distinctions, or modalities as they call them. And then it further breaks down each modality into a submodality. For example, in the visual modality, a submodality could be light, dark, shiny, rough, moving, still, etc. This might sound like it's getting off track. However, it's with this structure that not only can you map out someone's process and procedure for something that they do, but by telling them a story, a metaphor, or a suggestion in this structure, you can install that suggestion into their unconscious mind, bypassing their critical factor. This is a version of conversational hypnosis, and it can have profound effects. And again, this is where simply echoing their words in the exact sequence and structure they give you can have the greatest effect to get their attention and bypass their critical factors. The positive side of this sort of modality as submodality alteration and installation is it can be effective for curing phobias, addictions, or even improving learning by installing a procedure into you. This was one of the main reasons that NLP was made, to map the great minds and install their abilities into others. However, the grifters can also take advantage of these principles for manipulation. So now you're starting to get the idea of how, through watching our blink rate, using word patterns to get us into a non-critical state, which can be observed by our blinking slowing down, then using our own language patterns back at us to install change, either change we want or change we don't, and how this can be stacked with other techniques to make it more powerful. This is where Milton Erickson comes in. He's considered the master of conversational hypnosis, and many techniques have been adapted from his work. He became paralyzed at the age of 17 as a result of polio, and through his own self-hypnosis, speaking to his unconscious mind, he slowly learned to regain some movement. However, while he was paralyzed, he learned to hone his observational skills to a profound level. It was said he could tell by the sound of someone's footsteps what mood they were in. And when he would look at someone, on their face, he'd see the blood flush to different areas, and he'd be able to interpret their emotional state or their thoughts as a result. Some of the patterns that can be learned here are the cause and effect and complex equivalence presuppositional language. These language patterns are what we use to create our own beliefs, and as so, they get accepted as true. The other point with presuppositional language is that it forces you to create an image just to be able to understand the sentence that's being said. As 75% of the process is already done at this stage, if you just then keep the mind focused on the future, distracted, example by saying now, an awareness presupposition that changes your focus to the present moment, or you start with another hypnotic language pattern, that suggestion will get installed in the background without being criticized by you. So a quick explanation of these language patterns. There's too many to cover here, but you can start learning more at any time. The now pattern is the easiest one to understand. By finishing a suggestion and then saying now, it draws your attention to the present so you don't go back and question what was just said. This means it gets installed to the unconscious mind. This can further be added on by adding a question to the end, as this further brings their attention to the question instead of trying to analyze what was just said before it. It also acts to fractionate you, bringing your awareness into the present, then back into trance, then back into the present over and over again, deepening the trance state each time. In part 3, I'm going to talk about language patterns such as spatial, temporal, presuppositional language, cause and effect, complex equivalence, then the grifter, energy healers, pattern interrupts and fractionation, storytelling and metaphor, and subjective validation. Once the next part is uploaded, you'll find the link in the description of this video. If you want to learn about herbs, supplements, or natural treatment plans, check out my website.